They didn't fear us. They didn't even consider us worth fearing. To the Zorak Dominion, humanity was a backward species clinging to bullets and bones. They laughed when our plasma shields failed. They laughed when our last fleet fell. But when Captain Reyes Valoric stepped onto that battlefield, with nothing but a battered rifle and a death wish, their laughter died. One shot, just one, shattered their commander's skull and silenced 1,000 alien worlds. They came at Ititi dawn, their ships blotting out the weak light of Ragnar's fall, casting long shadows over the jagged hills and blackened ruins. The air trembled with the hum of graviton engines, a sound that meant death was near. Captain Reyes Valoric stood atop the crumbling watchtower, eyes narrowed, fists clenched around a rusted railing. Behind him, the last remnants of human resistance, waited, silent and broken. 3 minutes until bombardment, crackled a voice over the comms. They're not waiting for surrender. Reyes didn't flinch. Good. Let them waste their firepower. The voice hesitated. Sir, that was our last transmission from Earth. No reinforcements, no evac. I wasn't counting on any. Reyes growled, turning from the edge. His boots crunched on the dust, the only sound among the hushed, terrified men. You think, this is where we die? No, this is where they bleed. He marched into the command room, flicking a switch. A hologram of the Zorak fleet appeared, their signature crimson symbols blinking over each ship. Massive dreadnoughts, hundreds of them. The odds were beyond impossible. They always had been. A younger officer, his uniform tattered, stepped forward. Captain, even if we fight, we won't last 10 minutes. Reyes' eyes burned into him. Then we make it the worst 10 minutes of their lives. The ground shook violently, dust raining from the ceiling as the first wave hit the outer defenses. Screams echoed through the base, men scrambling for cover. Weapons brought to bear against an enemy that mocked them from the stars. The Zorak hadn't landed yet. They didn't need to. Their weapons would do the talking, but Reyes knew something they didn't. He always did. Bring me the core, he ordered. The officer paled. The Screamer Core? That's suicide. That's victory. The core was locked away beneath the base, a relic of Earth's most dangerous days. A device designed to disrupt energy fields with a pulse so violent it tore through dimensions. It had been banned, buried, forgotten. Reyes had remembered as they brought it up, sealed in its steel casing. Reyes ran a hand over the cold surface. You hear that? He asked the room. They listened. Only the distant thunder of war answered. That's fear. They've never known it. Time they learned. Keyed into the comms again. This is Captain Valoric. Load the Screamer. Prep all rail cannons. We don't aim for victory. We aim for memory. Let them remember this. The base erupted into movement. Men ran, not away, but toward battle. If they were to die, they'd take as many of the bastards with them as they could. Minutes later, the sky opened. Zorak troopships descended, sleek, black, and humming with energy. One broke from the formation, broadcasting a signal, a voice, smooth and cruel. Human insects, you have resisted long enough. Surrender, and we may spare your ashes. Reyes stood in the open, staring into the sky. He keyed his mic, his voice calm, steady, lethal. Come down here, Vul, or are you afraid of sticks and stones? Silence. Then laughter, harsh, echoing. The enemy commander had heard of Reyes, dismissed him as a relic clinging to dead tech and old pride. Perfect. Very well, came the reply. Your death shall amuse me. The lead ship landed with a hiss, its ramp lowering. Zorak's soldiers poured out, tall, armored, their eyes glowing beneath their helms. And at the center, Lord High Executioner Xyrix Vul. Towering, confident, weapon at his side, Reyes walked forward alone. You are Reyes Valoric? Vul sneered. This is your defense? Reyes didn't stop. I'm the end of your arrogance. You bring a rifle to a god's judgment? Rays raised the godhammer, ancient metal gleaming. I bring your lesson. The Zorak laughed again, surrounding him. Rays didn't flinch. He pulled the trigger. The screamer activated, the round spinning with an unholy scream, sound bending, light warping. It didn't hit Vul directly. It tore through his shield, shattered the air, and cracked the ground beneath them. Vul staggered, eyes wide, clutching his chest. Blood seeped through his armor. He fell. The laughter stopped. Rays turned to the stunned soldiers. Run! Some did. Others fired, but the moment was broken. Humans surged from the base, rail cannons roaring, screams turning to battle cries. Rays didn't watch. He walked past Vul's corpse, calm, cold. This is your warning, he said, voice echoing across the field. Earth is not yours. The war had just begun. The base reeked of oil, blood, and desperation. Even with the temporary victory, no one celebrated. Rays paced through the dimly lit corridors, his mind a storm. Vul was dead, but the Zorak fleet remained, orbiting like vultures, ready to descend. One shot had given them fear. Now they needed chaos. A grizzled lieutenant, Marek, stepped beside him, wiping soot from his face. Commander, Vul's deaths rattled them, but they're regrouping. Their comms are in disarray, but we've only bought ours. Then we make every minute hurt, Rays muttered. He paused at the war table, its cracked surface flickering with incomplete maps of enemy positions. His eyes scanned for weakness, for anything exploitable. What about the screamer? How long until it's ready again? Marek hesitated. That shot melted half the coils. We can't fire again without tearing this place apart. Rays slammed his fist on the table. Then tear it apart. Rip the base down to the bones. I want it firing again, even if we burn with it. Marek opened his mouth to protest, but Rays' glare cut him down. Yes, sir. As the lieutenant left, Rays turned to the comms panel. The traitor still breathed. He had let the worms slip through, leaking their plans to the Zorak, knowing full well it was bait. Now it was time to tighten the noose. Patch me into the outer comms, he ordered. Static crackled, then cleared. A voice, cautious. This is Helix Outpost. Identify. This is Captain Rays Valoric of Ragnar's Fall. I have a message for your commander. There was a pause, murmuring. Then another voice, smooth, almost smug. Captain Valoric, I hear you've made quite the noise. I've made a promise, Rays replied. You've got someone of mine, don't you? A rat who told you where to strike. Perhaps he told us too much. Pity you trusted him. Rays leaned forward, voice low. Let me tell you what trust really is. I knew he'd turn. I fed him lies. You came for an empty vault. While you groped around in the dark, I killed your god. The silence was thick. You're bluffing. You're bleeding, Rays snapped. You think killing me will stop this? You think taking this rock ends it? The galaxy's watching. They saw your commander fall to a primitive. Every species you crushed, every world you enslaved, they know now. You can't silence that, the alien voice hissed. You die tonight. Rays cut the transmission. He stood still, the weight of war pressing against his shoulders. He could feel it, the shift. They weren't laughing anymore. But fear alone wasn't enough. Fear had to spread. He made his way to the lower hangar, where engineers tore apart drones, stripping, wiring, salvaging power cells. The air buzzed with frantic energy, men shouting, tools clanging. Marek met him halfway, a grim look on his face. We've got maybe one more shot. After that, this base goes dark. One's all we need, Rays said. Ready the drones. Load them with the rest of the Screamer's charge. Marek frowned. We're flying blind with that tech. You could kill us all. Rays' voice dropped, a growl. Then die scared or die fighting. Marek nodded. turning to bark orders. Rays climbed into the central hub, a rusted platform surrounded by flickering monitors. He addressed the room, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We have one shot left, one scream left in this dying beast. You've seen what it can do. They think we're cornered. Let's show them what happens when a cornered animal bites back." The men cheered, but it was hollow. They knew this wasn't victory. It was vengeance. The plan was madness, but it was all they had. The screamer's pulse, dispersed through the drones, would create a web of disruption, frying Zorak systems mid-assault. It wouldn't stop them, but it would cripple their formation, buy precious time. As the hours passed, preparations neared completion. Rays found a moment of stillness, alone in the armory. He stared at the Godhammer, the rifle that had killed, a legend. He ran a hand along its barrel, feeling the heat still lingering. A voice behind him. "You never stop, do you?" Rays didn't turn. "Stopping gets you buried." Merrick stepped forward. "We've done the impossible. Vul's dead. You proved your point." "This isn't about a point. This is about survival." "You think we survive this?" Rays finally looked at him. "No. But we make sure they remember. That they know Earth doesn't bow. That no matter how far they chase us, there's always someone left with a bullet and a grudge." The final warning sounded. Drones launched into the sky, carrying death in every circuit. The Zorak ships stirred, readying for the kill. Rays donned his gear, the weight of it familiar, almost comforting. He met his men at the gate, their faces grim, resolute. "Today we burn," he said. "Tomorrow they bleed." And with that, they marched into the storm. The air was electric, heavy with the scent of ozone and the burn of metal. Above, the drones spread like a dark swarm, their payloads armed with the screamer's wrath. Captain Rays Valoric stood in the command center, watching the enemy fleet shift uneasily, their once perfect formation now fraying at the edges. They could feel something was wrong, but they didn't understand it. That's what he wanted. "Drones are in position," Merrick's voice crackled through the static. "They're waiting for your order." Rays didn't reply immediately. His eyes tracked the flagship at the center of the Zorak formation, a monolith of war bristling with weapons, shields flaring in anticipation. He knew they believed the death of Vul was a fluke, that another hammer would soon fall. Let them. Let them gather. Let them think they could crush humanity again. "Light it up," Rays said. A second of silence, then the sky split. The drones detonated in sequence, unleashing. The screamer's fractured energy. A wave of distorted sound and light tore through the void, ripping into the Zorak systems. Shields flickered, sensors failed, and weapons misfired. The fleet convulsed, ships colliding, turning their precision into chaos. "Targets scrambled," Merrick reported. "They're blind." "Not blind enough," Rays muttered, eyes narrowing. He turned to the tactical display. "Send teams 1 through 4. Hit their forward assault ships. No mercy." The base's remaining fighters surged from their hangars, ragged, outdated, but deadly in skilled hands. They weaved through the disoriented enemy, striking it weak. Points, blasting engines, and rupturing hulls. Explosions lit the sky, and for a moment, the tide seemed to turn. But Rays knew better. "Commander," came a voice, urgent, panicked. "They're regrouping. Flagships restoring power. They're adapting." Of course they were. The Zorak weren't fools. Fear had shaken them, but fear wasn't enough to break them. Not yet. "Merrick, focus all fire on the flagship's core." "I want that ship burning." "It's heavily shielded," Merrick protested. "We can't penetrate." "We will!" Rays cut him off. "Divert all remaining screamer energy to the Godhammer." Merrick froze. "That'll destroy it. And you! Raises!" Voice was cold steel. "We're past saving. Now we make them pay." He grabbed the rifle, its weight familiar, deadly. The screamer cells were already connected, the weapon humming with unstable power. He stepped into the lift, rising to the surface as the ground quaked beneath him. The sky above was a maelstrom of fire and metal, and in the center, the flagship loomed. Marek's voice echoed in his earpiece. "You'll never make it close enough." "I don't need to be close." The lift stopped, and Reyes walked into the open, the battlefield stretching before him. Debris rained down, screams filled the air, but none of it mattered. He raised the god hammer, aimed at the sky, and locked onto the flagship's core. "This is for every world you burned," he whispered. He fired. The shot tore through reality, a bolt of sound and force that defied physics, ripping through the void toward its target. The air around Reyes cracked, the ground splitting beneath his feet. He didn't move. He didn't flinch. The bolt struck the flagship, bypassing its weakened shields, drilling into its heart. For a breathless moment, nothing happened. Then light exploded from within, the ship tearing itself apart from the inside. Shockwaves rippled outward, smashing nearby vessels, hurling wreckage across space. Cheers erupted over the comms, disbelief and triumph mixing into a roar. The flagship was gone. The enemy shattered, but Reyes stood alone, the god hammer a smoking ruin in his hands. He dropped it, breath shallow, vision dimming. The price had been paid. "Commander," Marek's voice broke through, thick with emotion. "They're retreating. You did it." Reyes didn't answer. He stared at the sky, now clearing, stars shining through the smoke. His knees buckled, but he remained upright, just long enough to see the impossible made real. "Tell them," he said quietly. "Tell them we're not finished." And with that, he fell. The silence didn't last long. As the wreckage of the Zorak flagship drifted through space, lit by distant stars and fires still raging in orbit, the surviving enemy ships began to scatter. Orders screamed through fractured channels, commanders desperate to salvage control, but the fear had already sunk in. They had witnessed the impossible, a primitive force annihilating their strongest vessel, and the myth of Zorak invincibility had shattered. Marek watched from the command center, hands gripping the edge of the console as the scanners confirmed what he barely dared to believe. "They're breaking formation, pulling back from the inner perimeter. We've got them running." Behind him, technicians cheered, some collapsing to the floor, tears mixing with sweat and grime. He didn't join them. His eyes stayed locked on the distant form of Reyes Valoric, still unmoving where he had fallen. Static filled his earpiece, the Godhammer's last surge having fried most of their comm systems. But he didn't need confirmation. No man could survive a shot like that, not from a weapon wired into the heart of a dying base. "Get a team down there," Marek barked. "Recover him, now!" As soldiers scrambled, gathering the wounded and fortifying what was left of the base, the first transmissions from outside the planet began to flood in. Other human colonies, long silent or thought-lost, reached out, their voices a mix of shock and awe. Word was spreading faster than the Zorak could stop it. The death of Lord High Executioner Vul, the destruction of the flagship, and the man, who stood alone against them with a relic in his hands. It was already legend. A call came through from Central Command, their signal weak but steady. "Marek, report." He wiped blood from his temple, clearing his throat. "The enemy is retreating. Ragnar's fall holds. Captain Valoric, he led the charge." Status. Marek hesitated. "Unknown. But he fired the shot. The flagship's gone." There was a pause. Then, "Understood. Reinforcements are en route. Hold your position." He killed the transmission and turned back to the displays. One by one, enemy ships blinked out of range, warping away, leaving behind only debris and silence. But he knew better than to call it over. The Zorak didn't forgive, and they didn't forget. This wasn't an end. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous. Minutes later, the recovery team returned. Ray's body was draped in a makeshift shroud, carried by two soldiers whose faces betrayed more than exhaustion. They carried the weight of something sacred. Marek approached. Heart pounding, one of them stopped, nodding toward the wrapped form. "He's gone, sir." Marek clenched his jaw, forcing down the grief. "Take him to the central hall. He deserves more than a grave." Word spread quickly. Every soldier, technician, and officer gathered around as they laid Ray's down, the Godhammer's remains placed beside him. The room was quiet, reverent, the air thick with the kind of respect that only war could forge. Marek stood at the front, searching for words, knowing that nothing could match what the man had done. "He gave us a chance," he began, voice steady. "When everyone else counted us out, he stood up. Not because he thought he'd win, but because he knew we couldn't afford to lose. He fought not for glory, not for medals, but because he was human and because that meant something." A murmur of agreement swept through the crowd. "They came here to crush us, to make us an example. Now, we're the ones they fear. We hold this ground not just for ourselves, but for every world that thought humanity was finished. We are not finished, and we will not forget the man who reminded them." As the gathering broke, officers returned to their stations, the weight of survival now replaced by something stronger: purpose. Marek lingered, staring at the broken rifle, its edges still scorched. He reached down, placing his hand on the cold metal. "You brought the fire," he whispered. "We'll carry it now." Hours passed, the base transforming from a battleground to a fortress. Reinforcements arrived, bringing supplies, fresh troops, and news from across human space. More Zorak fleets were regrouping, but they were no longer united. The loss of Vul had splintered them, and with every broadcast of the battle, more allies rose from the shadows. Humanity wasn't alone. Marek stood on the observation deck, watching the stars. A voice behind him stirred him from thought. "We've received a message. From the outer colonies." He turned. "What do they want?" "They're asking for orders. They want to know when we strike back." A slow smile crossed his face. "The first in days. Soon." As the stars above Ragnar's fall shimmered, the echo of one man's defiance rippled through space. The Zorak had come to end a species. Instead, they had awakened a storm. And somewhere in the silence, the memory of Captain Ray's Valoric waited, as if daring the universe to try again. The silence had settled like dust, thick and heavy in the air. But it was not peace. Ragnar's fall still smoldered, its surface scorched, its defenders weary but unbroken. The ashes of war clung to every corner of the battered outpost. But within its ruins something else stirred. Not despair, not grief, resolve. The kind that only comes from facing the impossible and standing tall in the wreckage. Marek stood alone in the strategy chamber, the lights flickering, the systems half-functional, but enough to show what mattered. The map of nearby systems blinked, steadily red marks fading, some now gone entirely. Reports from outlying human colonies poured in. For the first time in years, the Zorak weren't advancing. They were withdrawing, regrouping, unsure. The death of Lord High Executioner Vul and the destruction of their flagship had shattered the illusion of dominance they had enforced for generations. A soft knock echoed against the steel door. Marek turned as Lieutenant Kellen stepped inside, holding a data pad, his face cautious but alive with purpose. "They're calling it the Valoric line now," Kellen said, handing him the pad. Marek scanned the reports. Systems once thought lost were aligning, declaring themselves part of a new front. Not Earth's command, not the old alliances that had failed them, but something rawer, born of fire and blood. The name of Ray's Valoric wasn't just legend now, it was a banner. "Every world that's held out," Kellen continued, Every colony that's managed to fight back, they're uniting behind what happened here. They're sending supplies, ships, soldiers. They believe it can be done. Mariki nodded slowly. Because it was. Kellen hesitated. They want leadership, sir. They're asking for orders. They want someone to tell them where we strike next. Merrick's eyes flicked to the corner of the room where the remnants of the Godhammer lay, scorched and silent, yet still defiant. The man who had wielded it was gone, but what he had started couldn't end here. Tell them we hold Ragnar's fall, Merrick said. Tell them we rebuild, stronger than before. Then we take it to the Zorak. Kellen's eyes widened. You mean, we've spent too long running, hiding, surviving. Now we make them do the same. Merrick stepped forward, voice hardening. We hit their supply lines, we tear into their border worlds, we show them that humanity isn't just fighting, we're hunting. Kellen gave a tight nod, already turning to relay the orders. Merrick followed him out into the courtyard where engineers worked around the clock, erecting new defenses, salvaging what they could from Zorak wreckage. Weapons were being reforged, armor repaired, ships refitted. There was no waiting now. No one expected a miracle. They were the miracle. A low rumble filled the air as a new wave of ships descended, not enemies, but reinforcements. Fighters from other colonies, some barely space-worthy, others gleaming with scavenged tech. Pilots disembarked, not soldiers, but warriors, hardened by the same fire that had burned through Ragnar's fall. They didn't ask for permission. They brought their will to fight. Merrick addressed them as one. You came here because you believe something changed. You're right. The galaxy thought humans were finished. We've heard that before, but now they've seen what one man with a cause can do. They saw a bullet, fired from an ancient gun, bring an empire to its knees. That wasn't luck. That was us. Murmurs of agreement swelled into shouts. They will come again, stronger, angrier, but this time, they'll find we've learned from them. No more standing ground just to survive. Now we take it. We carve out space for ourselves, not because they allow it, but because we demand it. A cheer erupted, loud and wild, a sound of people unshackled from fear. Merrick let it carry before lifting his hand. We've all lost something. Friends, families, worlds. But hear this. We don't fight for the dead. We fight for the living. For every breath they tried to steal. For every life they crushed thinking, we'd break. We are human. And now, they know what that means. The crowd surged forward, ready, willing. There was no army here, no formal command, just unity. The kind born not of treaties, but of survival, of shared scars, and a common enemy. Later, as night settled, Merrick stood at the makeshift memorial, the stars above casting a pale glow over. The name etched into the metal, Ray's Valoric. He didn't speak, didn't need to. The silence spoke for him. In the distance, engines roared as new fleets took to the skies, heading into the unknown, not as prey, but as predators. The war wasn't over. It had only just begun, and in its flames, humanity found something no alien could ever understand, hope forged in defiance, purpose born from ruin, and a promise that echoed across the stars. They would never laugh at human weapons again.